The court is already in session. You did not walk into this video by accident, and you did not stumble onto this title by curiosity. Heaven has been sitting on this case for longer than you realize, and tonight, the seal is finally being broken. Before you scroll, before you speak, before you even sigh, I need you to understand something that is going to change the way you look at the last several months of your life. There is a woman, or maybe more than one, whose name you have not spoken out loud in weeks. You have carried her memory in silence, not because you wanted to, but because every time her face crossed your mind, something inside your spirit went quiet. You told yourself you had forgiven. You told yourself you had moved on. But tonight, I am going to tell you what heaven never let you forget, and by the time this word ends, you will know exactly who she is, why God waited until now to speak on it, and what has already begun to unravel in the place you cannot see. Stay with me, chosen one, because the ruling that is about to be read over your life is not going to sound like anything you have heard from another channel. This is not motivation. This is not a general encouragement. This is a verdict. You have been living under a strange kind of pressure, and you could not name it. Doors that should have opened easily kept sticking. Prayers that used to fly seemed to hit a low ceiling. Favor that used to run toward you started running past you, and every time you tried to put words to what was happening, something in you whispered, "It is not me. It is not me." And you were right. It was not you. There has been a case open in the courts of heaven, with your name on the evidence table, and the reason it took this long to be heard is that God was gathering witnesses. He was not being slow, he was being thorough. Because when heaven finally rules, it does not rule halfway. Before we go any deeper, if this ministry has been a quiet altar for you in these silent months, and you feel led to stand with the work, the Ko-fi link is in the description for anyone who wants to support this channel. Now let us keep going, because the next part is where the case begins to open. There is a pattern the enemy uses that most believers never learn to detect, and it is the pattern of imitation, not opposition, imitation. The enemy studies you long before he strikes at you, and when he strikes, he does not always attack. Sometimes he copies. Sometimes he takes what heaven marked for you and slides it onto another shoulder, hoping you will assume it was never yours. And that is exactly what happened in your season. Someone watched you, someone listened to your prayers, either literally in a room where you were vulnerable or spiritually in a place where your covering was thin. Someone took notes, and when the moment came, she copied the pattern of your blessing, not the character behind it, not the covenant beneath it. Just the shape of it, just the surface, and for a while, it looked like she was walking into what you had been waiting for. That is why the pain was so sharp. That is why you could not shake the feeling of being robbed. Because in the natural realm, it looked like a coincidence. In the spirit realm, it was theft. Now listen closely, because heaven does not respond to theft the way people do. Heaven does not race the thief. Heaven does not scream. Heaven does not scramble to prove ownership. Heaven simply lets the copy walk far enough down the road to expose itself, because a copy cannot carry weight. A copy can wear the appearance of a blessing, but it cannot hold the anointing that was meant for the original vessel. And that is the first thing I want you to understand tonight. What she took was not the blessing, it was the shell of it. The real thing was sealed inside you the whole time, waiting for the verdict to be read. Before I keep going, hit the like button quietly if your spirit just said yes to that, because that agreement is part of how this word settles into your life. I know some of you are already asking, why did God let it happen at all? Why did he let her get close enough to copy anything? Why did he allow the imitation to succeed even for a season? And I am not going to give you a shallow answer, because you have been given too many shallow answers already. The truth is that God allowed the copy to run in front of you For the same reason, a judge sometimes allows a false witness to keep speaking. Not because he believes the lie, but because every word the false witness speaks becomes part of the evidence against her. She did not know it, but every time she moved in your direction, every time she took what was not hers, every time she stepped into a space heaven had reserved, she was adding to her own file. And heaven was writing it all down. There is a second thing I have not touched yet, and it is going to break something in you when I say it. The consequence that has arrived is not primarily about her, it is about you. Yes, there is a reckoning coming to the one who copied. Yes, there is a stripping already underway in her life, and by the end of this word, I will show you the signs of it. But the deeper consequence, the one heaven has been building toward, is the release that is coming to you. Because in the kingdom, every verdict has two sides: judgment on the imitator, restoration to the original, and you cannot receive the restoration until the imitation is exposed. That is why God waited. That is why the silence was so long. He was not withholding. He was aligning the timing so that when the ruling dropped, both sides would happen at once. Her exposure. Your release. Same moment, same breath, same verdict. Let me pause here, because I know some of you have carried this quietly for so long that you almost do not believe healing is possible for it. You have watched someone step into a version of your life. Maybe it was a relationship. Maybe it was a ministry position. Maybe it was a business idea you spoke about in a room where you thought you were safe. Maybe it was a style, a rhythm, a way of moving that was distinctly you, and you watched her wear it like a costume. And the hardest part was not even the theft. The hardest part was the silence of God while it happened. You cried out. You asked him where he was. You asked him if he saw. And it felt like the heavens were made of iron. But hear this carefully. Silence in the courtroom is not absence. Silence in the courtroom is deliberation. Heaven was not ignoring you. Heaven was building the case. Think of Joseph in the pit and then in the prison. He did not have the luxury of watching what was happening in Pharaoh's court while he waited. He did not know that his name was already being placed on a timeline. He did not know that every year of injustice was being logged on a scroll that would one day be unrolled in front of kings. All he knew was the cold of the stone and the length of the night. But the same God who let him sit there was the same God who timed his release down to the exact dream of a Pharaoh he had never met. That is how heaven works with the ones it chooses. It does not rush, it positions. And when the verdict finally comes, it does not come alone. It comes with elevation, with vindication, and with witnesses who have to admit publicly what they whispered against you privately. Comment right now, from a quiet place in your spirit, I receive this verdict, because there is a real weight in agreement, and heaven records agreement the same way it records accusation. Do not skip that step. Your comment is a testimony before the record is closed. Now let me expose the first sign, because you asked me earlier how you would know that the consequence has already begun in her life. The first sign is that what she copied is starting to feel heavier to her than she expected. She thought she was stepping into ease. She thought she was stepping into favor. She thought that by wearing the outline of your blessing, she would inherit the flow of it. But instead, she is beginning to feel a strange weight she cannot name. Sleep is not resting her. Provision is not satisfying her. Attention is not filling her. Because the blessing you were being prepared for was custom built for someone who had gone through the fire you went through, and she did not go through it. She only wanted the outcome without the refinement, and so what fits you is crushing her. That is not bitterness talking, that is spiritual physics. Weight without formation becomes a burden, and she is beginning to feel it. The second sign is subtler, and you might not have caught it yet. The people who applauded her when she took what was yours are quietly beginning to pull back, not dramatically, not with confrontation, just with distance. Calls not returned as quickly, enthusiasm that has cooled, introductions that have stopped happening. Because when heaven begins to withdraw its covering from a stolen blessing, the human systems built around that blessing begin to lose their glue. She may not have connected the dots yet, but the atmosphere around her assignment is thinning, and the ones who chose her over you are starting to sense something they cannot articulate. That is the beginning of the reversal. If this channel keeps meeting you in the exact place nobody sees, subscribe and turn on the bell, because the messages that are coming next are not going to be random. Heaven is speaking with continuity, not by accident, and you cannot afford to miss what is being released in this hour. Now here is where I need you to lean in, because I promised you at the beginning that by the end of this word, you would know exactly who she is. I did not mean I would speak a name out loud. I meant that heaven is about to bring her face to your mind with such clarity that you will not be able to explain the confirmation any other way. Some of you have already seen her face while I was speaking. Some of you felt your stomach tighten at a specific moment in this word. That was not anxiety, that was recognition. Heaven was pointing. And here is what I want you to do with that recognition. Do not text her. Do not confront her. Do not post about her. Do not even pray a prayer of judgment over her. Because the moment you do any of those things, you take the pen out of God's hand and try to write the verdict yourself. And when you do that, you interrupt a ruling that was about to be devastating in your favor. But because I know restraint alone leaves the flesh restless, hear me carefully. There is a hidden layer to this restraint that I have not told you yet. Every time you resist the urge to respond, heaven adds another line to the evidence against her, because your silence is being recorded as agreement with divine order. Your restraint is not passivity, it is testimony. Let that settle for a moment. Your silence is testimony. The very thing you thought was weakness in this season, the fact that you could not defend yourself, the fact that God kept closing your mouth every time you tried to explain, the fact that your side of the story was never told publicly, that was not humiliation, that was preservation of the case, because a witness who defends themselves too loudly becomes suspect. But a witness who stands still while the truth builds around them becomes unshakable, and that is what God has been forming in you. Unshakability, not just healing, unshakability. There is a difference between someone who has recovered from a wound and someone who has become immovable because of it. God is not just healing you, He is establishing you. If a specific name or face just came to mind while I was speaking, comment the word established, because you are about to enter a season where the ground under your feet does not move, regardless of what people say around you, and heaven wants your agreement on record before that season begins. Now let me open the third layer, because there is a piece of this that will explain years of confusion for some of you. You have been asking why certain doors closed on you right before this person appeared in your life. You have been asking why God let you almost have things, only to take them back at the last moment. You have been asking why He allowed disappointment to touch you just before the imitation walked in. Here is the answer. He was not withholding, He was extracting. He was pulling you out of arrangements that were designed to trap you inside a lesser version of your calling. And the imitator was actually a decoy. Read that again in your spirit. The imitator was a decoy. She was allowed to walk into the shell you were being pulled out of, because heaven had bigger plans than the shell. What she thinks she stole is what you were already outgrowing. What she thinks she inherited is what God was already replacing in your life with something you could not have carried in the previous version of yourself. And that is why the consequence for her is not just loss, it is entrapment. She is now bound to a version of blessing that is beneath what God intended for you. Feel the weight of that. She did not skip ahead of you. She stepped into a floor you were being lifted off of. And now she cannot get off that floor, because it is not her floor. It never was. It was a holding pattern God used to protect you until He could position you higher. And this is the part of the story most people will never understand. The enemy always thinks he is stealing your future when he is actually only touching your past. Heaven's future for you cannot be copied. It cannot be intercepted. It cannot be worn by another vessel. It can only be received by the one whose name is written on it. Take a breath here, because I know this is a lot. I know some of you have been holding your chest through parts of this. And if this word is meeting you in a real, ongoing place, and you feel led to stand with this ministry, the Ko-fi link is below in the description for anyone who wants to keep these messages going. Now let us keep moving, because we are only halfway into the ruling. There is a woman in the scriptures whose story mirrors yours in a way you may never have connected, and her name is Hannah. Most of us remember Hannah for her tears in the temple and for the birth of Samuel. But we forget the woman standing on the other side of her story, Peninnah. Peninnah had what Hannah did not. Peninnah had the appearance of blessing, children, standing, a place at the table that Hannah could not access. And Peninnah did not just have it, she used it. Year after year, she provoked Hannah at the very time when Hannah was most raw before God. She copied the posture of a blessed woman while carrying none of the depth Hannah was being formed into. And what did God do? Did He silence Peninnah immediately? Did He strike her mid-provocation? No, He let her run. He let her taunt. He let her expose the smallness of her heart at the same table where Hannah was being prepared to give birth to a prophet who would anoint kings. Because heaven was not comparing them. Heaven was contrasting them. And by the time Samuel was born, Peninnah's name faded so far into the background that Scripture barely mentions her again. The one who could not have children became the mother of a nation shifter. The one who used her fertility as a weapon became a footnote. That is what is happening in your story. The one who copied you is going to become a footnote in the very chapter she thought she was going to headline. And you, the one who wept in the temple, the one whose lips moved without sound, the one whom others accused of being drunk in your grief when you were actually praying at a depth they could not follow, you are going to birth something in this next season that will silence every mouth that mocked your waiting. That is not a metaphor. That is a spiritual pattern, and the pattern is already unfolding. Let me tell you what else is unfolding. There is a specific season being loosed over your life right now, and it does not look like what most people would call breakthrough. It does not look like a stage. It does not look like a viral moment. It does not look like sudden fame, because God is not returning to you in the currency that was stolen. He is returning to you in a currency that cannot be stolen. Intimacy with Him. Discernment that cannot be counterfeited. Peace that does not move when the storm moves. Prophetic accuracy in the small daily choices of your life. Provision that shows up quietly and consistently without a spectacle. Relationships that are covenant instead of convenience. These are the returns that heaven is preparing, and none of them can be copied by anyone, because they only grow in the soil of what you have already walked through. Hear this carefully. What was taken from you was surface. What is being returned to you is substance. And that is the mercy inside the verdict. God is not just giving you back what she took. He is giving you what she can never have. And every day from now forward, that gap between what she carries and what you carry is going to widen. Not because you did anything to widen it, but because you finally stopped trying to close it. Share this with someone who has been silently carrying a similar case in their own life, because there are chosen ones out there right now who are one message away from finally understanding why the imitation was allowed. Your share might be the confirmation another soul has been begging heaven for all week. Now I want to speak to the part of you that is still hesitant, because I know some of you are afraid to fully receive this word. You are afraid that if you accept the truth that you were copied and that heaven is ruling in your favor, you will become bitter. You will become vindictive. You will lose the softness that has been one of your quiet strengths. Beloved, hear me. Receiving the verdict does not require you to harden. In fact, the ones who receive divine vindication with a tender heart carry the deepest authority afterward, because they prove that authority does not have to come through cruelty. You are not being asked to become like the one who wronged you. You are being asked to become the one who can hold the fullness of what she was never able to hold. That is a completely different assignment. And speaking of assignment, there is a piece of your calling that has been dormant, specifically because of what happened. Some of you have felt a strange stalling in a specific area, and you have not been able to explain it. It is because heaven paused a portion of your assignment until this case was ruled on. That portion of your assignment could not be released while an imitator was standing in the road of it, because heaven does not release its true weight into a contested space. That is why you have felt like something in you has been waiting on something outside of you. The wait was not a personal failure. The wait was a legal delay, and the delay is ending. Not next year, not eventually. Now. Let me pause and say something to those of you who are still asking, but what did I do to deserve this? Why did any of it happen? Beloved, the reason it happened is the same reason it happens to every chosen vessel. The enemy does not counterfeit what has no value. He does not imitate what has no future. He does not send a copy to steal from a vessel that carries nothing. The very fact that you were targeted for imitation is one of the loudest confirmations you will ever receive that what you carry is real. He does not waste his effort on empty ones. He hunts the ones whose future scares him, and your future scared him enough to send an imitator to try to reroute it. Let that sit with you. Now, before I go further, I want you to hit like on this video. Not as an algorithm gesture, but as a quiet declaration in your spirit that you are agreeing with the ruling being read over your life. Because agreement is a legal action in the kingdom, and this is not a passive moment. There is another dimension of this I have not opened yet, and it involves the people around you. Because when a divine verdict lands, it does not just touch the imitator, it also touches the audience. Every person who watched what happened to you and stayed silent. Every person who chose sides when there were no sides to choose. Every person who cooled toward you when you needed warmth. Every person who leaned toward her because her version of the story was more convenient than yours. Every one of them is about to face a moment of reckoning inside their own conscience. Not because God is trying to embarrass them, but because He is trying to bring them back into truth. Some of them will repent quietly. Some of them will reach out with an apology that feels 10 years too late. Some of them will simply grow uncomfortable around you in a way they cannot explain. That discomfort is the beginning of their own restoration, if they will let it be. Do not despise it. Do not gloat over it. Just recognize it for what it is. Because here is the thing about a divine verdict. It is not just a punishment mechanism. It is a mirror. It shows everyone in the story who they really were. And what a person does with that mirror determines their next chapter. Some will look and turn. Some will look and harden. But you, chosen one, are not responsible for their response. You are only responsible for staying aligned with the verdict that has been read over you. And here is the alignment. Do not go back. Do not revisit the arrangement. Do not attempt to rebuild what heaven has already ruled dismantled. Some of you are going to be tempted, in the coming weeks, to try to reconcile in a place that was never designed to be reconciled, because you will interpret the softening around you as an open door. It is not an open door, it is a closing chapter. There is a difference between reconciliation and reabsorption. Reconciliation happens across a healthy distance. Reabsorption drags you back into the very structure God pulled you out of. Do not confuse the two. And if you feel the pull to blur that line, remember this. The moment you step back into that structure, you reopen a case heaven has already closed, and heaven does not appreciate the courtroom being disrespected. Because I told you at the top that I would not leave a restraint hanging without giving you a revelation, hear this. Every time you resist the temptation to re-enter what God dismantled, a fresh angel of assignment is being released into your next season. That is not poetic language. That is legal language. Refusal to reabsorb what was ruled against becomes the trigger for the release of what was ruled for. So your no to the past is the yes to the future. It is not one or the other. They are the same act. Let me now turn toward the interior of your own healing, because a verdict without healing becomes hardness, and God is not building you to be hard. He is building you to be whole. Some of you are still carrying a subtle self-blame that has never left, and it sounds like this in the quiet moments. If I had just been sharper, if I had just kept my mouth shut, if I had just not trusted so easily, if I had just guarded that room better, none of this would have happened. Beloved, that voice is not the voice of the judge. That is the voice of the accuser trying to slip a second case in under the first. The judge has already ruled that the fault was not yours. The judge has already dismissed the file that the accuser tried to open against your discernment. You did not miss something you were supposed to catch. You were not naive. You were not careless. You were trusting the way a whole person trusts, and your wholeness was not a defect, it was your design. If this word is truly reaching the hidden corner it was meant to reach, and this channel has become a place of consistent confirmation, subscribing is one of the ways you stay connected to what heaven is releasing next. This is not just a channel, it is a station for souls in this exact season, and the messages coming are for those who cannot afford to miss what God is saying. Now let me open one more layer that I have been holding, because before we move into the sealing prayer, there is something specific that needs to be exposed. The name of the emotion you have been carrying is not sadness, it is not anger, it is not even grief. It is displacement. You have felt displaced. Displaced from a version of your life that was moving forward. Displaced from a community that once felt like home. Displaced from a sense of self that made sense to you. Displacement is one of the most spiritually disorienting experiences a chosen vessel can endure, because it does not have a clear enemy to fight. It does not have a scene to point to. It just has a feeling of being off the map. And the reason you have felt off the map is because the map you were on was drawn by someone else's assumption of your life, not by God's design of it. He has been redrawing the map in secret, and the reason it felt like nothing was happening is that he was working on the paper you were not standing on yet. But now, the new map is arriving. And on this new map, the woman who copied you does not appear. She was never on your true map. She was only on the map of the old assumption. The moment you step onto the new map, she disappears from the conversation of your life, not because you erased her, but because she was never in the geography God actually authored for you. That is why some of you have felt, deep down, that even in the pain, she did not fully belong in your story. She belonged in a chapter that was written by fear, not by design. And when fear-authored chapters end, everyone in them exits the narrative. Comment the words "new map" if this just cracked something open in you, because your comment will be part of how heaven records your alignment with the story God is actually writing. Now I need to speak about your prayers, because some of you have been afraid that your prayers during this season were not heard. You prayed, and you cried, and you asked, and you felt nothing come back, and you have quietly wondered if something was wrong with your access. Nothing was wrong with your access. Every one of those prayers was heard, and more than that, every one of them was filed. They are not lost. They are not scattered. They are sitting on a shelf in the courtroom, and each one is being called into evidence, as this ruling is finalized. That prayer you prayed at 3 in the morning when no one was awake. That prayer you whispered in the car after the meeting where they chose her over you. That prayer you sobbed in the shower where you thought no one could hear. All of them are there. All of them count. Not one of them was wasted. And here is the part that will make you weep. Some of those prayers were not just for you. Some of them were building the case for someone else who is coming behind you. Because heaven often uses one person's silent prayers to prepare the ground for another person's release. Your prayers may be part of why someone else you have never met is about to walk into their own verdict. That is how large the kingdom counts. That is how far your obedience reaches. And if this ministry has been steady water in your dry season, and you want to help keep these messages going out to others in the same place, standing with the work through Ko-fi in the description is one simple way to do it. This is not the message asking you to give. This is the message telling you what your prayers have already built. Before I begin to seal this word, there is one more revelation I have to bring, because if I did not say this, some of you would leave with a partial picture. The consequence that has arrived is not going to look dramatic in the natural. Do not wait for a public spectacle. Do not wait for a scandal. Do not wait for a news moment. The way heaven rules is often too surgical to be televised. What you are going to see instead is a quiet unraveling. A door she thought was open will suddenly not open the way it used to. A person who championed her will drift. An opportunity she counted on will slip. A confidence she wore will begin to crack, first only in her mirror, then in her voice, then in her decisions. This is not a wish. This is not a curse. This is simply what happens when a vessel stands in a blessing that was not tailored to her formation. Ill-fitting blessings do not last. They loosen, they slip, they fall, and the one wearing them ends up more exposed than she was before she took them. And you will not need to say anything. You will not need to prove anything. You will not need to explain anything. You will simply be somewhere else by then, standing in a place that fits you so perfectly that anyone who looks at you and then looks at what she has will not need a lecture from you to see the difference. Here is the last thing I want to give you before I pray. What she copied was your blessing, but she could not copy your covering. She could not copy your covenant. She could not copy the years of hidden weeping that shaped the ground beneath your feet. She could not copy the private altar where you have met God without an audience. She could not copy the specific words He has whispered to you in the middle of the night that made you weep without knowing why. That inner architecture is not stealable. It is not photographable. It is not something a competitor can screenshot. It is fused into your identity by the fire you have walked through. And no matter what she wears on the outside, she cannot reproduce what only pressure can produce. That is why the verdict is what it is, not to punish her, primarily, but to restore the honor of the one heaven marked from the beginning. Restoration is heaven's true language. Judgment is only the door through which restoration walks, and you, beloved, are standing at that door tonight. If this word has genuinely met you in a real place, and you feel led to stand with this work, the Ko-fi link is there in the description below for anyone who wants to support this ministry in a simple way. Now let me pray this over you, because there is one more thing I want to seal before this word closes. Before I pray this over you, there are still a few things that must be settled, because if I sealed this word right now, some of you would leave with your hands full, but your understanding half-formed. And I cannot allow that. There is a specific mechanism I have not explained yet, and once you see it, the last several years of your life will make sense in a way they never have before. It is the mechanism of the timed reveal. In the natural courtroom, evidence is presented all at once, in a single sitting, in a single day. But in heaven's courtroom, evidence is often released across seasons. God does not always show you everything at the beginning, because if he did, you would react instead of respond, and your reaction would forfeit part of the ruling. So he shows you a little at a time. First, an unsettled feeling. Then, a specific dream. Then, a chance word from someone who did not even know they were speaking prophetically. Then, a confirmation from a stranger. Then, a message like the one you are hearing right now. And each of these was a piece of the evidence being unsealed to you at the pace your spirit could bear. That is why some of you feel like you have been slowly waking up. You have been slowly waking up, because heaven has been slowly unsealing, and now the unsealing is almost complete. That is why this word carries the weight it carries. You are not at the beginning of the reveal. You are near the end of it, and when you get to the end of the reveal, the next thing that happens is action. Not your action, God's action, and his action is what you have been waiting to see manifest in your circumstances. The unsealing is the internal work. The manifestation is the external work. And the internal always precedes the external, because heaven will not release outward what you have not yet received inward. That is a kingdom principle you can build the rest of your life on. Let me deepen this even further, because there is a specific spiritual dynamic I need to name. What happened to you was not just theft. It was a test of your response before promotion. Every serious promotion in the kingdom is preceded by a test of how you respond to being wronged. Joseph was tested by his brothers before he was elevated by Pharaoh. David was tested by Saul before he was crowned by Israel. Hannah was tested by Peninnah before she birthed Samuel. The pattern is not incidental, it is procedural. Heaven does not elevate a vessel that has not been tested in how it handles being copied, mocked, misrepresented, or overlooked, because elevation without that testing produces leaders who cannot survive their own visibility. So the imitation you endured was not only theft, it was the qualifying exam, and the fact that you did not retaliate, the fact that you did not manipulate, the fact that you did not tear her down publicly, even when you had every reason to, was not weakness. That was you, passing the exam without knowing you were being examined. And now the diploma is arriving in the form of the very thing you were told to wait for. Comment the word qualified, if that just landed on you, because heaven registers agreement, and this is one of those declarations that unlocks the next room of your assignment. And here is another thing you should know. The people who will meet you in the next season are people who could not have found you in the previous one. They were not in the geography you were standing in. They were not in the room your imitator was in. They are in a different altitude entirely, and your ascent is the introduction to them. This is why God has been so protective of your circles lately. He has been thinning your relational field on purpose. He has been removing people who were not appointed for this altitude, because they would slow the ascent. And I know some of the departures have hurt. Some of them felt sudden. Some of them felt confusing. Some of them still feel unresolved. But every departure was strategic. Not one of them was a random loss. Each one was a lightening of the load, so that when the elevation finally comes, you rise fast, clean, and unencumbered. There is also a piece here about the season of your voice. Because for a long time, you have felt that when you speak, your words do not carry the weight they should. You have watched other people say almost the same thing you were saying, and their words moved rooms, while yours seemed to fall flat. That was not your imagination. That was a divine muzzle. God had placed a season of restraint on your voice, not to silence you, but to season you. Because a voice that has not been seasoned in silence will always carry more of the speaker than of the sender. And he was refining you to be a carrier, not just a talker. Now that this ruling is being read, the muzzle is coming off. Not because you demanded it, because the season required it to come off. And when it does, you will notice that words that used to fall flat suddenly hit their target. Prayers you used to pray without visible result begin to produce evidence. Instructions that people ignored begin to be received. That is not a coincidence. That is a released voice. Steward it with reverence, because a released voice carries more responsibility than a suppressed one. And if this channel has become one of the places where God keeps meeting you in this exact season, subscribe and stay connected, because these words are not standalone. They are a continuing stream, and the next piece of what heaven is releasing may be the very confirmation you have been waiting weeks for. There is one more revelation I must bring, because it will explain the timing of everything. Why this month? Why this hour? Why not last year, when it would have felt like relief? Why not next year, when it might have felt too delayed? Why now? The answer is that heaven times its rulings around the readiness of the vessel to steward the aftermath. A verdict is not just a moment. It is a doorway into a new responsibility. And if the verdict had been released too early, you would have carried it with unresolved anger. If it had been released too late, you would have carried it with hardened cynicism. But right now, at this exact hour, your heart has softened just enough and hardened just enough in the right places to steward the ruling well. That is a very rare emotional configuration, and it does not happen by accident. It was cultivated in you, quietly, through every conversation you did not have, every retort you did not send, every plan of revenge you allowed to die on its way to your mouth. That cultivation is why tonight is the night, not last night, not next week, tonight. And the exposure that is coming to her is not something you need to watch for. Take your eyes off her permanently after this video. Do not check on her. Do not scroll her. Do not ask about her, because if you keep watching for her fall, you will miss your rise, and your rise is the true story from here forward. Let heaven handle her file. You steward yours. Now, Father, I stand with this soul, this chosen one, this beloved of yours, who has waited longer than they thought they could wait, who has bled quieter than anyone knew they were bleeding, who has watched what looked like their portion be worn by another, and still kept their hands lifted toward you. I thank you that you are not a distant judge. You are a present Father, and I thank you that even in this ruling, your first movement is not toward punishment, but toward restoration. Right now, in the name of Jesus, I seal every promise you have ever spoken over this life. I seal every dream you planted before they were born. I seal every whisper you have released in the middle of the night. I seal every prophetic word that was ever confirmed and every one that is still waiting to be fulfilled. And even as I seal it, I loose fresh angels of assignment over this soul, angels that carry the exact frequency of this next season, angels that will move ahead of them in rooms they have not yet entered, angels that will hold open the doors that no imitation can walk through. Father, I ask you to close every open case the enemy tried to file against your child in secret. Let every whisper of accusation be silenced. Let every false witness lose their voice. Let every imitation be exposed by its own weight. And let your child walk out of this hour lighter, cleaner, clearer, and more established than they have ever been in their life. I pray now for the deep interior places, the ones no one sees, the rooms of their heart where the years of silence built up like dust. Blow through those rooms, Holy Spirit, not with force, but with the wind of homecoming. Bring back the parts of them that grief made quiet. Bring back the laughter that pain took. Bring back the confidence that comparison chipped away. And even as you bring these back, I plant one final seed in this prayer, a seed that will grow after this video ends, a seed of continuous confirmation, so that in the coming days, You will keep speaking, keep witnessing, keep confirming this word through small signs, unexpected voices, and quiet moments that make them stop in the middle of their day and know that you are near. I declare over this life that the copy has been dismissed, the original has been recognized, the imitation has been recorded, and the verdict has been rendered. Your child is not who they were the day this video began. They are seated now in a truth they cannot unknow, and with that truth, they walk into a new geography, a new grace, and a new authority that no other vessel can wear. Seal them, Lord. Seal their mind against the temptation to look backward. Seal their mouth against the urge to explain. Seal their steps against every trap disguised as a familiar road. Seal their heart against bitterness, and seal their spirit into the kind of peace that will confuse everyone who tried to unsettle them. And let this be the season in which they finally understand, in the deepest part of their being, that they were not late, they were not lesser, and they were not left. They were being held for this moment, and this moment has come. In the name of Jesus, it is done, it is settled, it is sealed. Amen.